Excuse me, late for work! Coming through!
Looking good, Spidey!
Hello, New York! Ha-ha! New suit, same old me.
When I was a kid, there were so many stories that presented adventures of superheroes. Animated series, comic books, movies, video games. Back then, during my childhood, even if there were good or bad stories, you wanted to watch them, you wanted to be those heroes and have their adventures. I'm a part of the generation that grew up with Spider-Man and X-Men on Fox Kids, with Batman and Superman on Cartoon Network, and I didn't know the difference between Marvel or DC. To me, all of them were in the same world that you can discover it through TV, and as a kid, they were the superheroes, the good guys who fought for what is right in their own way. The nostalgia of those times is a big part of someone like me when a film or a game is released that is based on a comic book character. And I know that I'm not anymore the main target audience for their stories, but I am still curious to see what ideas will present now, how they will try to put the characters in a new light and in new situations. And to be honest, from time to time, at least recently, I was very disappointed. However, I wasn't disappointed a few years ago when this game was released. Marvel's Spider-Man, or Spider-Man PS4 as it was nicknamed, is a game that does not bring anything new on the table regarding what a Spider-Man game is, but how it presents all those ideas made me enjoy the game and feel the nostalgia that I had when I was a kid regarding superhero stories. I grew up playing different Spider-Man games, and yes, each game had something special. A different atmosphere, a new way of gameplay, some new elements to make it more fun, more unique, or a different interesting story, but after all, it was almost the same recipe. Some of them were good, some of them were bad, but Spider-Man PS4, even if it had the same concepts and presented the same idea, I don't know, it worked. It was different, it was fresh, it made me play the game thinking of the childhood times, and in a way, made me enjoy the game even more. But what was good at the game? Was the story? Was the gameplay? What was it? Probably I will repeat myself when I'm gonna say that everything made this game to be considered good, but I'm saying that because, well, it's true. It's not just the story or the movement or combat or even the fact that the city is full of life. When a game is made in a way that you can actually feel that every single component is made with attention, you cannot say that a certain game is not good. But never mind that. Trying to channel my thoughts to the main idea, I'm thinking more and more about the story of the game, of how well it is and how well it is made. The story presents this already mature Peter Parker who is Spider-Man for quite some time. From the very beginning, the game instantly throws you into the action with Spider-Man rushing to help the police to capture the Kingpin. The encounter is won and the Kingpin is arrested. After that, Peter will encounter a mysterious organization called the Demons, who is led by a man with some weird powers and who wants to attack Norman Osborn, who is the mayor of the city apparently. After dealing with the demons, in the end, Peter has to face a new villain, a person very close to him that gathers a good number of different yet well-known villains and attempts to poison the city with a deadly virus that was created by Osborn for whatever reasons. Hearing the synopsis of the game, I realized the story is somewhat loyal to the comic book material, more exactly to the original way the Spider-Man comic books were made. And analyzing it, I realized that the story is made in a way that it does not require to present the characters. You already know who those characters are even if you are not totally familiar with the comic book lore. And even if they are main story characters or side story characters, you recognize them. You know who they are and what they do. Jumping directly into the story is a nice way to get caught up from the beginning in the atmosphere and the dynamic of the game. You feel the vibe and the rhythm of the story, of how the game will progress. The story of the game is made so well that expands the world and the context of the game in a beautiful manner. You don't play the game only from the point of view of Spider-Man. From time to time, The game kinda rips you from the vibe and the normal dynamic and lets you play with Mary Jane or Miles Morales to enlarge the view of the story of how the main actions are outlined around those characters. And the game goes beyond with the characters' themes and their motivations. Every single one of them has a theme that makes their personalities to be extremely important in the progress of the story and makes their actions to be logical and realistic. For example, for the whole part of the game, Peter has this role of an apprentice who helps his mentor Otto Octavius to succeed in his technological quests. Well, this role is secondary because he is most of the time a full-time superhero, but you get the point. But also Peter kinda becomes a mentor for Miles in the end. Not only as a friend who tries to help Miles to move over his father's death, but also regarding as a mentor into teaching him how he can deal with his newly discovered spider powers. And talking about Miles, I love the fact that the game is in a way an origin story for his character. If you know about his comic book counterpart and who he becomes, this can make you smile and understand better the way Miles is constructed for this game. Mary Jane is built as this powerful character who goes beyond limits and pushes buttons in order to prove to Peter that she is as good as him, to be his equal in a way, which makes her character to be interesting and makes you realize that in a way, Peter and Mary Jane are so compatible and that are made for each other, regarding the professional or romantic context. This idea came into my mind when I realized her role into the story, like she is a reporter for Daily Bugle and takes photos and makes investigations, in a way what Peter did most of the time. It was a nice touch to see this concept presented into her story. You can say that she is taking the role of Peter in Peter's activities and lets Peter to be the spider full time. May Parker is just that old auntie that helps you and is there for you no matter what, and her death at the end of the game makes a powerful impact not only on Peter, but also on the player, because her death was in a way expected because she is the last step in Peter's fully growing up. Well, Peter had to grow up in order to get the role of a parent, friend, mentor for Miles, but May's death was said no matter what and makes the player understand what her role was and see how Peter will fulfill the role for someone else. Dying to protect the others is what she did, and being the woman who raised Peter makes you realize what kind of person Peter is and what he is capable of doing. But not only the good characters have this aura around them, even the bad guys have a reason for their actions. I mean, Otto Octavius became a bad person after numerous obstacles created by Norman Osborn and by his long-lived dream to achieve perfection and to make his work worth it. Mr. Lee became a bad guy because of Norman Osborn and his experiments that he suffered in his childhood and the death of his parents. And Norman Osborn, even though he may look like this innocent big-time billionaire that is the mayor of the city who decides everything for everyone, his actions, I mean the actions that made and created all those bad things to happen into the game, were made in order to help his son Harry to heal and recover and get rid of a terrible disease. It is interesting to see the way Norman Osborn is the moral villain of the game, but I also love to see how the villains have a tragic story, a moral compass of some sort that force them to become villains. Sure, the context does not excuse the actions, but it is a beautiful way to construct the character having something that you can relate with him, to understand him. Makes the villains to be more human, to have something that you can feel sorry for them. It gives this idea that anyone can cross the line between good and evil depending on the context and the decisions we made. But to be honest, almost all of the comic book stories try to present that, thus making this game to be more comic book accurate, not only with the story but also with the vibe and the feelings the game is making the player to feel. I love when the characters have something special that defines them properly in a story. Every single character from this game has something unique, and their imprint is felt in every interaction of the game. Whether it is Kingpin's influence or Osborn's, I love this impression of consequences. It makes the world bigger, full of life and full of characters. And for a comic book story, I think they did a good thing to maintain the classic pattern of writing a story to the modern approach and presenting issues that are important to properly represent a character. It makes the game to be more immersive, it makes you want to play the game even if you are not a fan of Spider-Man games. Speaking of immersivity, New York City is presented in a way that gives the sensation of a huge city that takes some time to explore it. I love the fact that the game does not present the city as a big place that can be traveled pretty fast though. It takes a while to travel from the very top to the very low point of the city. It makes the player explore the city in a way, to say it like this. And being a city full of life, it encourages the player not only to travel through web swinging, but also to walk the streets a bit. Being able to interact with the citizens is a small but nice attention to details regarding the interactivity with the world. The city is full of life and I love its evolution during the game, from a city that is normal from day to night, to the moments when the city is enforced by the Sable Soldiers. Having the possibility to stop different types of crimes makes the player feel how the city needs a hero, even if there are some punks who rob a store, or a car chase, or some gangs who fight with each other. The diversity between those activities is a big one, so the player will not get bored by the same type of enemies. Being split into neighborhoods The city gives a lot of stuff to do, which is quite repetitive to be honest, but I don't think that this is a bad idea. I mean, the neighborhoods are unlocked during the gameplay and the player unlocks gadgets and new abilities that makes the game so much fun. I don't know how well the city is recreated from reality, but I enjoy how well it is made, how colorful and how the attention to details gives quality to the environment and the atmosphere presented. It's pretty funny actually. I'm trying to think of something that could make the game boring, but nothing comes to my mind. There is something regarding the game that is an element of relaxation, to say it like this. For me, even if I am in no mood of playing the game or I am too stressed from a mission or a challenge, somehow you get relaxed pretty fast by swinging throughout the city or running across the buildings. Another thing that might get the player to relax is to find some collectibles that are connected with some comic book lore. There are many locations of the map that are a direct reference to the other comic book characters, like the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Wakandan Embassy, or the Avengers Tower. It gives a nice sensation to know somehow that probably another hero might appear from somewhere. Of course, there are other ways presented to enlarge the story of the character through the backpacks that the player can find throughout the city. Each backpack represents a fragment of Peter's experience as Spider-Man throughout the years, and the way you have them as mementos, it may give the player this sensation of nostalgia. It may bring a smile to his face, because some of them are small references to comic book moments, and if you know about those moments, makes the discovery of backpacks to be more satisfactory in a way. But being honest about it, the locations and the backpacks are just references that you see them from the beginning into the game. But if you pay attention, the game has many more references, or Easter eggs to use a more comic bookish term. Come to think of it, the first shot of the game has some references to Tony Stark and Reed Richards. The backpacks could be a reference to Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man, because that version keeps losing the backpacks while he runs to be a hero. There is a moment when Spider-Man is battling Mr. Lee in a subway and Spidey tries to stop the train and says that it was easier the other time, this being a possible reference to the train scene from the Spider-Man 2 film with Tobey Maguire. There are other Easter eggs that are connected to the bigger lore of Spider-Man, but for that you have to play the game and find them. What is worth mentioning, because it would be a crime not to mention that, is the appearance of a certain man. You can take it as a cameo, because it is a cameo and not an Easter egg. It is a special appearance of Stan Lee into the game. Stan Lee, the man who co-created Spider-Man, appears in this game for a brief moment. A special, kind moment between Peter and Mary Jane in which the creator appears to say that they were always his favorites. The scene was made perfectly, and to be honest, I love the fact that they really put him to interact with the characters. It made the moment not only to be a nice one in the game, but a memorable one, considering the fact that it was his last cameo before his death. The one from Avengers Endgame, I consider it more a posthumous cameo, even if it is filmed before his death, so I count it like an homage so and so. I mean, it is a Marvel game, and I expected for an Easter egg regarding Stan Lee, like it was in the first 3D Spider-Man game where he narrated the beginning, but to see him for a brief second talking with Mary Jane, yeah, that is a special cameo nonetheless. Regarding the gameplay of the game, I have said it before that the game does not bring something new to the table. If you have played previous Spider-Man games, well, you know the drill. It's an open world game where the player can explore the city by swinging on the web from the building to building. He can wall crawl the buildings and jump very high, so technically you have Spider-Man's powers and can swing throughout the city. However, there are some improvements. You can zipline more accurately and more acrobatically. You can run on the buildings and then do some acrobatic moves to continue to run and reach the next building. The movement is more flawless than the previous games, but this is understandable seeing how the technology evolved regarding video games. The combat is pretty much the same, allowing the player to use punches and kicks in combat. The player can dodge the attacks thanks to Spider-Man's Spidey sense, making the combat to be extremely dynamic. Many people compare this type of combat with the one used in the Batman Arkham series, but to be honest, that's just stupid. Spider-Man has had this type of combat since 2004 and 2005, with games like Spider-Man 2 and Ultimate Spider-Man, so it is impossible for a 2005 Spider-Man game to copy a mechanic from a 2009 Batman game. Anyway, the idea of combat in this game is that it allows you to have a direct approach, but also you can be stealthy, taking down enemies from close range or from long range, which is a nice mechanic. It makes you feel to be Spider-Man more accurately a bit. Oh, and what can you say that Spider-Man PS4 got from the Arkham series is the fact that you can use gadgets during combat to create different combinations and have more fun while you defeat the bad guys. There are a lot of different gadgets that Peter can use, from gravitational traps to web mines and web bombs. Also, the player has different abilities that can be unlocked from different suits that can heal Spidey, or make him stronger, or make everyone from combat to have 1 health and beat everyone, depending on the way the player wants to play. And speaking of suits, There are like 33 or 34 suits that are into the game, not mentioning the DLCs. Each suit has a certain ability that can change the gameplay for the player, and being able to put mods on the suit to be stronger is like a buff during combat. True, each suit ability can be set for the other suits, which makes the suit to be just cosmetics, but in a way, I think it's a pretty good thing in this setting. I would have wanted the abilities to be set strictly for a suit, but then the other suits would have been useless. Like that, each player can choose what suit he wants to wear and have the best ability to use during the game. Another thing that you might say that was inspired from the Arkham series was the way you unlock the police towers to reveal the neighborhoods. It may be inspired from the Arkham series, it may be inspired from Assassin's Creed, but who cares? The mechanic is introduced logically into the story as Spider-Man is helping the police to fix the towers that will help him unveil different activities on the map, so in the end, it makes sense to me to have something like this. Speaking of story, besides the main story, there are some side quests to complete which will reward the player with different suits or buffs, like Black Cat's side quest to find her cat dolls around the city, or doing Harry's research around the city to solve different problems regarding ecology or weather. There is a pretty funny yet annoying a bit quest in which you have to catch pigeons around the city, but thinking of how it is made, it tests the player's agility and accuracy in a way. You have the outposts that differ regarding the enemies, from Kingpin goons to demons and sable soldiers. Oh, and how can I not speak of the Taskmaster challenges that are so diverse that tests the player's creativity during the combat, or stealth strategy, or the speed movement throughout the city. Some of those challenges are so annoying when you try them firsthand, but after 2 or 3 tries you start to see the pattern and then it is pretty easy to complete them. So there are a lot of things to do in this game. The player has so many things to do, I don't think he will get bored that easily. But that depends. Probably it has too many activities that are the same, but after all, that depends on the way the player is experiencing and enjoying the game. Oh, I almost forgot. While the player has many options of gameplay as Spider-Man, the player has a lot of puzzle minigames that can be completed as Peter. It was a nice surprise that they did this different sense of gameplay to differentiate the way you play as Spider-Man with the way you play as Peter. It's like there are 2 different personalities that solve problems in different ways. Sure, there are moments when there are some puzzles that can be solved by the player is Spider-Man, but I like to think that in that moment it is more Peter who solves the puzzle, the context being more close to Peter in that moment than to Spider-Man. Spider-Man PS4 has something special after all. It is a nice experience when it comes to a video game that is based on a comic book character, and is a good experience also as a normal game. It has some funny things that catches the player in its magic. The soundtrack helps a lot too because it is made in a way to feel like a hero and to make you jump into action as Spider-Man. And speaking of funny things, there are 2 elements that come into my mind when I think of the game. The game has a fast travel mechanic that is useless to be honest in this game because you are Spider-Man after all, you want to swing across the city, but if you use the fast travel option, a funny loading screen with Spidey riding the train will be seen in different situations. A useless mechanic, but for the sake of those screens, you kinda use it from time to time to see the reactions of those civilians from the train. Another thing that remains in my mind is J. Jonah Jameson's podcast. I don't know who the guy was to have the idea to implement such a thing, but I have all the respect for him. Swinging across New York and hearing JJ's reactions to everything Spider-Man does in the game, from the main story moments to why Spider-Man has a punk rock suit, makes the day to the player. His reactions are amazing and hilarious every time he speaks, and having those moments during the game cuts the tension of the moment. And every time you realize JJ is gonna start talking, it kinda makes you want to listen to him and to see what he is gonna say this time. It's like the game is reacting to your actions. I like this concept, it makes the world bigger without showing too much, and with all those elements that can make this game to be an interesting experience, it adds a certain something to the game, something that you will remember about it with a smile on your face. The superheroes are in a way the today's version of ancient stories about gods and legendary warriors, and their stories have the same purpose as those old stories, to present a hero with its good and its bad things, and to be an example for the one who discovers his story, to learn from its experience. But now that depends on how the story is made and what type of hero the character is. Spider-Man PS4 does the same thing. It does not present a situation or a succession of moments. It has something that catches the player in its grip. Thinking more about it and trying to compare it with other Spider-Man games that I played when I was a kid, probably the style is the same and only the storyteller is the one who is changed. Probably it has the same magic as the old games, but I grew up and see the new one in a different light than the others. Whatever it may be, this game has something special that can make a new player of a Spider-Man game or a returning player to have the same experience while they play the game. From time to time, I think it is a nice experience to come back to this game and play a couple of hours to get relaxed. And now being remastered and was released also on PS5 and PC, it makes the access to the world of this game to be much easier. As an off-topic, I am a bit disappointed by the fact that the developers changed Peter's face in the remastered version. Now he looks like an underage kid or something. I don't know why they changed his face. They wanted their version of Spider-Man to look like Tom Holland just because he's the actor who plays Spider-Man in movies. This is in a way a downgrade to me, because I enjoyed the way the character was created originally, but that was the developer's choice after all. And even with this change, I can move on past this thing, and enjoy the game again on a different platform. It is a relaxing game, it is not that hard to play, it is enjoyable, it has a nice story, good soundtrack. Yeah, this game has some good elements that make the game experience of the user to be a nice one. I don't think that you have to be a comic book fan to enjoy the time in this game, but I am pretty sure that if someone tries it, it will be fun. Whether it is free roaming or combat, Spider-Man PS4 is a fresh way to enjoy a superhero story, and will give some memorable moments, catching you in its webs and feel like a superhero while you play the game.